Lovely.
Thanks, kiddo. My niece is infamous for.
Okay, welcome everyone. It is November 5th, 2024. Welcome to our 9 o'clock board briefing session. Let the record reflect that all 5 commissioners are present. It is election day, so we hope that everybody goes out and votes by 8 o'clock tonight. So give that plug for everyone to vote. So thank you for being here, and we're going to go ahead and get started with we have a pretty busy agenda, looks like. So Mike Burgess, nice to see you again. It's been a little while, so welcome back.
Morning, commissioners.
Getting ready for already.
Yeah, oh, sorry about that. Yeah, Jeff and I have been talking about, finalizing legislative agenda. This is going to be a follow-up on the items we talked about a month ago, in hopes of getting it solidified. And then kind of the biggest to do beyond finishing off the agenda is picking the date for the time, we brief your delegation. Jeff and I have a good idea of when that should be. I'm going to punt it to Jeff real quick, and then I think Jeff's probably going to come right back to me. But Jeff, if you got a minute to fill in some of the blanks I left there, and then I'll talk about the state kind of fiscal situation if you want.
Okay, so for since I've been here, we've always invited the 15 legislators that represent Spokane or parts thereof. We've usually had good attendance. Talking with Burgess, the week of December 9th is committee week, so we want to stay away from that. We'll be out of town. So then it's either early December, which I figure you guys will probably be budget heavy. So we're wondering if maybe the week of the 16th might make sense for, usually we've scheduled it for about an hour. Zoom option. A lot of them are showing up in person post-COVID, but just in this room talking through the agenda, getting a feel for what legislator might have interest in what issue, and just having that communication. Any thoughts on scheduling for that?
So you're looking
At the week of
16th through the 20th.
And the 17th is your last regular scheduled meeting. That'd be the Tuesday. I don't believe we have a Monday meeting that week on the books. If the 17th was going to be light, you probably could combine a regular meeting, but I have no idea what the schedule looks like on the 17th. That's probably none of us do at this point.
Probably wouldn't be briefed on much in the morning on a Tuesday, right? Because we get briefed on what we vote on the following week, and since we're not meeting for the next couple of weeks, I would assume that Tuesday morning would be lighter.
Yeah, could be.
So
you do also have a meeting on the 6th. There is a meeting on the 16th right now that could be used for this. So probably either morning.
Yeah, I would say if we could try to do it on Monday the 16th, that might be good.
Like them, like
because with the briefing, even though people have to be briefing for what is going to happen in January. So I have no idea. I think usually it stacks up kind of right at the end.
I would suspect there still will be some things on the 17th, even though the action won't be until later. I just don't recollect from the last. I don't think it's been empty. Yeah, for my memory.
Monday the 16th. You want to go at 9, push it out to 10. Some of
Whatever
them come
we
from.
think works for most of the legislators. Might be afternoon, we could try to. Things like we have sandwiches.
I think we had sandwiches last year.
We talked about it, and I think it got moved up.
yeah, I don't think we ended up doing food.
We thought that would work. But last year
I
we
think we had a conflict. I think some
It
of
was-
us had a new.
Yes, it was up against another
So we moved ours up so they
Yeah.
could. So I can also put around a few phone calls to see if there's other competition.
Yeah, my guess is, commissioners, that they would be back home that week because they're all in, not all, like the House is the first couple of days of the week before, the Senate's the last couple of days of the week before. when they'll be in Olympia, probably doing some of the reorganizational votes and some of that kind of stuff. So my guess is they'll be home, but I haven't reached out to any to find out if that's right. I'm just guessing.
Last year's conflict was a local, I don't remember what it was, but it was the school superintendents maybe? It was just a local meeting that a lot of the legislators
Yeah.
would be at.
I think let's just shoot for 16 or the 17th.
16 sometime in the morning. Oh, okay, I'll put out some phone calls.
I mean, we can always adjust our schedule on the 17th, you know, if we can make it work for them. Cause then you start getting close to the end of the week, you're getting closer to
Yeah,
the
to
the
holiday
holidays,
weekend,
yeah.
and I think people are gonna be,
Checked out. Okay, so we'll work on that. Do you want to do lay of the land, Mike?
Sure. So as we're getting closer to session, there's starting to be, more focus on things. And the biggest thing in particular, beyond getting through the elections and what happens with the initiatives today, because those will be impactful. Just on the budget side, you're probably already reading or hearing, and I'm hearing that you're going through something similar, that things are getting tighter. The legislature, the last budget projection came out and said that the legislature will have a deficit, I guess the state will face a deficit. It's a little bit of Olympia math in a way, though, because revenues are going to be up, but the reason they're talking about a deficit is funding ongoing programs will eat up the entire gain. It's about between 5 and 6 billion. But when you carry forward the programs, some of the state employee compensation things that have been negotiated, it will eat into that. So long way of saying that fiscal requests are going to be difficult. A number of the things that we're about to talk about do have costs associated with them. It always seems like the most important things do, as you know, in your role. So just kind of wanted to set the table there, just from a realistic standpoint of what the state's looking at fiscally. And if you have more questions about that, I can send you some articles about it that go in depth, but I didn't want to do charts and graphs for you this morning.
Comments on questions before we just jump into the draft agenda?
yeah, no, I'm hearing the same from legislators, that it's a tighter budget and there's not gonna be even though it's the biennium budget, session, there's not gonna be the money this year. That
Yeah.
people.
Okay, should we jump in?
Yeah, let's go.
So I printed out last year's formatted legislative agenda, the current one pager front and back, non-formatted. Goes in the same order, although I think there could be some reasons to reorder it after we go through it. But that'd be easier for you guys to follow side by side. The stuff in gray is language that came directly from department directors. So to start at the top of the non-formatted one pager. The formatted one is last year's agenda. Fire response, Chandra prioritized it. My request of her was to reduce it by 50%, which she complied with, and put in a couple priorities on individual assistance program, a public assistance program, and working with insurance providers. There's been an issue of insurance providers not wanting to insure certain areas. So that is straight from Chandra. You'll see it's a lot less text. I'm assuming we want to keep some sort of disaster relief in the program or in the agenda. It's not quite as maybe current as last year, but we saw a lot of people going through the rebuilding and some issues. So I assumed it would stay in, probably in a different order. Long pause, nobody speaks, I'll go forward. The county fiscal health, feel free to look at these later and let me know if I did something that didn't quite work for you. I just tried to reduce the text significantly without changing the thought process. So that's what the fiscal health is. Same for growth management. Question on the large building energy standards. If we're making this truly a priority list of what we want and what we think the legislature is going to do, wanted to get your thoughts on possibly cutting number 4 we'll get to on the capital budget, on the second side, we actually have a request in for fiscal health. But at this point, this is just kind of a statement without an ask. And so by comparison, last year we had 4 pages of text that turned into 6 pages formatted. So to actually keep this, once it gets formatted with white space on 2 pages, I'd love to cut a little bit more. What do people think of maybe cutting 4 and keeping the focus on number 2 on capital on the backside? My theme is gonna be cut, cut, cut.
Just on the topic, it's related. I'm wondering if we have checked in, Mike, with the city about the waste to energy plant. I know they are subject to the Climate Commitment Act, the cap and trade program. And I think they're looking at some kind of legislative ask that might be a policy proposal to delay the compliance for that facility while they complete a study. They're looking at carbon capture technology, I believe, to kind of help out with the compliance for emissions for that facility. Is that right, Kyle?
There's a component to that. There's also the report that was done by Ecology comparing the net emissions of the waste energy facility compared to landfilling. That did not show a tremendous disparity, but also completely underestimated the impacts of the landfills. And they returned those comments back, and to my understanding, they've not got much of a response, and I don't know where that sits with the legislature.
My thought was if the city's planning, because obviously they would be the lead, I would think, if they're pushing for some delay of the application of that law to that facility, we might be interested in looking at that as well.
That's more of a direct ask to you than a
Yeah.
philosophical statement. Other people supportive of us looking around language for that? Swapping it out?
I guess I'm with you that, deleting 4, I mean, we're gonna know more. What happens. Questions tonight. So, yeah, I just say.
The other thing too, commissioners, about number 4 is there is a study that was paid for in the last budget. I guess we're still in that biennium now, that is doing research about all public buildings across the state, showing the need that would be presented to the next legislature. When I say the next, I mean the 2026, not the 2025. And so a lot of folks that are in your position are going to wait to see the result of that. And I think a number of legislators are going to want to hold back and say, hey, I want to see what this study says. So we had talked about that about a month ago. But that's going to be Wasac's position too, I believe.
Mike, I seem to remember that in the last budget cycle, the state allocated $600,000 to fund a study of the carbon recapture and emissions from the waste to energy plant. Is my memory accurate with regard to that? And I thought that the study was a 1-year study, which means that it would have been, it's already underway and should be delivered hopefully in this legislative session.
You're correct, Commissioner. There was funding in the budget for this study. I don't remember the exact wording of it. I'll trust your memory on that. And normally those studies are meant to be finished this time of year so the subsequent legislature can act on that. And I wonder if that's some of what the city is waiting for as well.
I'll follow up with the city, work with Kyle, try to report back on what's going on there. That works.
Because I guess if the city's requesting it, I mean, we don't have a direct interest in the waste energy plant. I mean, we send garbage there on a contract, but. So to me, it'd be like any other outside group that would be supporting. Okay.
Yeah, but if they are subjected to the carbon tax, it's gonna increase the tipping fee and it'll push us to just go to long haul and abandon the waste energy plant. So, and now that we've got a transload out there, we can load it on rail and quite frankly, save our taxpayers quite a bit of money. And the difference between the paying the carbon tax and being able to long haul.
The carbon tax, in my opinion, is a game changer for the cost of the facility and a threat to the even existence of that facility here. But I will say that we certainly benefit from having competition. And the waste energy facility is in competition with the Adams County landfill, with the Republic landfills. And so more competition is going to keep everybody's pencil sharper. We're certainly seeing that the Adams County landfill is really underbidding everybody right now. Without competition, we don't know that.
But in our current agreement, we do have the provision that if the rate for the waste energy plant starts to exceed what we can do in long haul, that we have the ability to go to long haul.
We can take and we're actually, ironically, it's on our agenda today to discuss, but our agreement with the cities is we can take our waste wherever we need it.
Where we need to.
Take a look.
We'll get more info and come back. 5 and 6 should be in gray, not 6 and 7. I missed there. So 5 and 6, George Dahl in our housing program provided this language. Similar, as a certainly same themes as last year. The Homeless Grant Program, flexibility, housing trust fund, focusing on suburban rural. So in my view, is reduced but same themes. Condo development, same thing, as well as a mobile home park. Tried to not change the substance, but tried to really take out some of the background info, keep it more concise. If we have a legislator who shows interest in something, we can come in with that one pager of more information, keeping this more of the headlines. Any other comments on the front side before we flip? Okay. Page 2, the top, Arian from Broadband provided that, the same ask as I did with George and Chandra. What are your priorities, and try to take up 50% of the real estate on paper that you did last year. So those are her top priorities, the bead match, specific fiber hybrid combos, and a process one. Those of you that are involved in the broadband, does that look good? The AOC caseload standards is a big one that has come up. Talked about combining that with number 2 on the front side, the county fiscal health, because the county fiscal health is what is frequently referencing the unfunded mandates. AOC is an example of that. It's going to cost a lot more money. There's not money coming with it. So I wanted to get your guys' thought on using the AOC caseload standards as a strong example in number 2 on the first side.
I don't have any problem with that. I'm just wondering, I haven't been updated lately on the litigation. And find out in a couple of weeks. Yeah. I don't have any problem combining them. I just.
Seems to fit under a similar category.
Well, I'm just wondering, because, you know, do we strengthen the position by combining them together, or do we strengthen it by separating them and making the case that criminal justice system and indigent defense should be a state-funded initiative? And if the AOC is gonna triple their budget, then that should be something the state's paying for, not us.
I can move it just right below, that be kind of combined as you read it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it either way, because I see combining them, it provides that solid basis as to what.
Yeah.
How we're gonna go bankrupt if we have to do these things.
There's small counties that will go big.
Yeah, small counties are in the worst spot, I think, but.
Yeah.
It's nice and large.
We do talk about indigent defense in number 2, and that's what AOC
Right.
ISO standards relate to. So
Guys,
in the spirit of trying to condense and have a little more succinct, recommendation would be to combine them.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think an example is always specific examples. Always good.
I'll combine it when it comes back. If it's not working, we can try again. The
And,
tip,
I mean, also just to keep in mind, it's, you know, this is essentially like a conversation starter, and then we are the supporting information. The 5 of us are the supporting information. So, you know, it doesn't have to be a novel with all the, you know, with all the information. We're the information behind the document.
this is the notes we hope they will take.
Yes, exactly.
So when you leave, they're reminded of the conversation. TIF reform is one that was sent in to me. I think was that you, Mr. Commissioner
Yeah,
French?
I talked to Mr. Amacio yesterday, and he said that they should be wrapping that language up by maybe the end of this week, next week, and then it'd be ready to go. So, but you know, that's basically giving the state the ability to use their money on their assets, and then expanding the length. Not expanding, but providing clarity around all public safety features, not just a couple. So
Remind me, who's working on that language?
Jim Amacio, Roy Cogan, and
Oh, it's all local, it's not.
yeah,
Okay.
we're developing the language. Then we give it to Mike Volz and Richelli, and I wish Billy was still there, but anyway, then they will carry the ball forward.
That one's sounding good to everyone.
And then I will also let you know that FEMCIB and TIB are going to be supporting that legislation. And I think GRAB will decide here.
We do have some statewide organizations.
Yeah, we got statewide organizations that are supporting it as well.
Commissioner, I'll just add on that one anecdotally. I've gotten at least 4 or 5 calls from my colleagues that lobby for other agents or other interests that have an interest in TIF as well. So the word's out. So we'll look forward to the draft and see where we end up.
And then I also, the Washington Fire Commissioners Association is also going to weigh in support of it as well. So.
So has it been discussed at WASAC yet?
I
I would think that WASAC and AWC would be interested in the topic.
So I've had an introductory presentation on it, but not with the detail. And so hopefully we're going to talk about the detail here in a couple more weeks.
Anything else for more of the general operating before we transfer into capital? Okay, capital it is. So I put Plans Ferry at number 1 because that's our request into the governor's office. So I was assuming that would be our number 1. It's really, I just condensed down kind of our opening portion for what went into that. I mean, it was a 6-page document. Tried to hit the high points. What I'm going to increase that to 1.5 based on when Doug was in here. We have harder numbers now. So to actually finish out the 3 fields with turf and lights, it's about 1.4 something. So I just rounded it up to 1.5. Forgot to make that request before I printed. So that would be, that's number 1. The rest I would say aren't in a priority order yet. So the clean buildings, we've already talked about the subject matter. This is the ask portion. From last year, you'll see where we had a request of covering 50%, which last year we put in a 9.5 million ask. You know, we were told that was not possible. I don't think anybody was surprised by that. We did get 773. It was a Billig direct request that Commissioner Jordan helped on. That will help with at least one of our buildings. We put it in for the Public Works building. It is tied to tonight's election, that's Climate Commitment Act funding. Based on all the polling I've seen, the Climate Commitment Act will stay intact if the polling is accurate. So we'll have that funding that planners will have to get moving on because it's tied to the June 30 biennium. So once we know results. The regional so last year we had helicopter in general. I struck it for this year. No, let me put it back. If you want, we did have a helicopter request that came in from Chief Ellis. You can read about it under number 3. Short story, there's the 4 counties, mid to large size, that operate search and rescue. Those 4 counties together are requesting that the state fund what is regional assistance. I'm guessing with the realities of this budget cycle, there's probably little to no hope of that happening this particular cycle, unless some disaster comes that would make it front and center that would change the discussion. We'll hope that doesn't happen for sake of disaster purposes. So that's the request was a direct, would we put it in our agenda? We could also move it to a letter of support if there was support. That'd be another way to kind of go with some of these if we want to show some support, but we're not going to actually be, you guys aren't lobbying for it directly over there. This is the first conversation I've had with any of you on this. I have no idea where any of you are.
Well, I've talked to John, the sheriff, a little bit about it, and you guys, and I mean, I think what they're trying to do is to say, we're not the only ones doing this. There's others that are doing it, and so looking at the state that they all need it, and part of it's based on the laws that the state's putting in place. So I think it's. I mean, I would be happy to have it be there just as a conversation piece to talk about the need and why we're doing it.
But is it a capital ask or an operations ask?
We had that discussion. I'm not exactly sure. It probably is a little bit more operationally. Scott did find
I
where
mean, it
they
might be
And I
related
did
to
do $1
it,
million
but
capital to
police
this King County helicopter. That was a few years ago.
It was just this year. Yeah.
King
just an
County
article.
purchased a new $6 million helicopter. The state provided 1 million of the 6 million. So there is some state support.
This was kind of through WASPIC.
WASPIC is pushing this, so I do have, I can forward around the email and document from Chief Ellis, but there is a letter attached, so there'll be a high priority item for, or they're pushing for it to be, I don't remember exactly, but there's a letter about WASPIC in this.
That's what
I'm
I
not
said.
gonna put words in their mouth.
Would any of the 10 million help with our helicopter?
The way it's written is really more operational, isn't it? But
I haven't read the letter from WASPIC. My general understanding was it could be operational and some capital, but maybe it's just for the flight ops itself. Not sure.
If it's operational, then it's nicer because then we're not having to bill out the other.
Exactly.
entities.
Yeah, provides support, ongoing support for it.
Yeah.
The $1 million that was provided to King County appears to be completely separate from this. That's already been done. And King County's already purchased their helicopter, so this is an addition.
was this for a time frame? 10 million over
I did
biennium.
I just
don't
got,
remember if it was biennium or per year, so it is annual. I just
Really?
pulled it up.
Is there,
An ongoing state-funded grant program to provide 10 million per year to reinforce the local law enforcement. It looks like it'd be under reimbursement for when it's used, so
so
not
an up
just,
to amount?
that's
Okay.
what it's looking like on a 5-second read here, yes.
Thank you.
I mean, maybe we have Chief Ellis come and speak to it next time we meet on this, but I'd be in favor. I mean, it's like anytime we can show the need and why, and again, if you got WASPIC, like I said, that's what I thought they were the ones promoting it.
Let me hear you leave it in at this point. But maybe move it to operating, we'll find out exactly the appropriate spot.
Sure. And you'll send a letter.
I have a note to send that around to everybody. So then you'll recall 6 weeks ago, give or take, we had a list of capital budget requests that you guys kind of prioritized. I'd say kind of in a consensus-y conversation way, not a hard way. I did find that based on my notes, PFAS, I would say was kind of at the top. And there's kind of, I'd say, a second and third kind of, and then the rest all went together. So I've just added them here. PFAS did have a conversation with Scott last night. Thought maybe we could take the disaster relief fire response into a broader emergency response and incorporate PFAS into that section. Or is it, I mean, it's a huge issue right now. Do we want to have its own for headline and flashy light purposes?
Well, sorry.
Go ahead, sorry.
I see a lot of logic in combining it with the disaster relief. I mean, it's a one-time event. We need to have a response to it. It's a public health issue. So, tying it into that other agenda items might give it some more legs in terms of getting through the legislature.
Okay, so kind of.
Yeah.
You need to set. Move over there.
Do you, Mike, do you know if there's any other communities that are looking for funding that we could, collaborate with around PFAS filtration and?
I don't, Commissioner, but I know, given the conference, the Wasatch conference in a couple of weeks, that's probably a good place to ask around. I mean, I'll be there too. So I think that'd be a good place to hint around. And then I'm going to be on a call with the other county lobbyists here at 10 o'clock, and I can ask if anyone's doing that.
Good to have, east side and west side partners asking for funding and support.
And
Range
20 million.
20 million.
Commissioner French, that's the Spokane number, or you think a statewide number?
That's a Spokane number. So we've got a number from Ecology and apply the cost to it. And the administrative cost, you're going to come right at about 20 million. Going to deal with all the properties that have been contaminated. There's 259 of them.
259 properties.
Yeah.
I think it's 259 wells.
Yeah.
So some might be multi.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Roughly 259. That's the number we use.
59 but that's Ecology's number. So I don't have any reason to, and we've had 211 volunteer be part of the program. So, I mean, you can either use Ecology's numbers or you can use our numbers either way. But my guess is if we get 211 funded, then the 212th is going to be really mad. So
They'll get in line.
Yeah.
The money comes.
Be better to go
Well,
after
I mean,
259.
You're probably gonna find more. There's more testing to be done,
Oh,
right?
there's a lot more
Yeah.
testing to be done.
So this could just be called like phase 1
Yep.
filtration
Well,
for what we do know.
and so when Chad Pritchard's study comes out, then they start to identify point sources. And then there's going to be some liability mitigation money coming from that. But I mean, and circling back to the waste energy plant, that now is looking like a point source. Interestingly enough, WashDOT has across I-90 their road shop, and they've been putting chemicals in the ground, and Ecology just recently gave them a free pass on that, even though they know that the chemicals are there. So that's going to be another interesting challenge we got to work our way through.
So we'll keep PFAS in, combine it somehow with disaster relief, either part of or next door neighbor to. 20 million for opening. But
Question on that.
Yeah.
Do we have a It looks like it's like 77,000. Well, is that the math you were thinking of for cost? I was just trying to think of how do we have documentation to kind of support
Yes.
per well
Yeah.
cost for the filter?
Yes, so I've been working with Eco Water Systems, and they've been providing some estimations on the different configurations that they've encountered out there. They seem to be the lead supplier, installer out there, and so I've been relying on their numbers.
We do the whole point of entry or at the well, not at the house.
Yeah, these are all POET systems. These are not
There's the word.
the sink filtration systems. These are POET systems at the well. Yeah. So that's the difference between the 211 and the 259. Some just don't want to make the leap to the full well.
So the stabilization center, we've really focused on the feds last year. We're still, I believe, at 3 million in the Senate budget federally. Right now, I believe the continuing resolution is due December 20th. So we're not gonna know until almost Christmas. Unless they punt it again. Where that is, but I would expect it will stay at this point. Generally speaking, if it survives a full chamber, when they do the reconciliation, they stay in. Of course, we all know nothing's certain until the ink is dry with the signatures. But I'd say we have a pretty good shot of getting that. Do we want to also make an ask of the state, or do we want to, since we have some funding coming with that? I mean, I can make the case for it, and then I think it's something that would be appealing to a lot of people at the state. But my theme here is prioritizing fewer asks instead of the creamy peanut butter approach. So that's your guys' call.
So one of the questions I have is the state has their own opioid dollars that they have, and they've got to get out. And I don't know what they're doing with them. So it might be worth talking to the legislature to say, we would like this to go under that. We're using our settlement dollars for this. Where is that pot of money and how are you putting that out? Mike, I don't know, what your thoughts are on that, because the stabilization center, we're using our settlement dollars, opioid settlement dollars for it. I don't know where the state is with their settlement dollars. I mean, they got a large chunk. And so would this be a way for us to ask, from them, from that pot of money that this could be a use of that to get directly for treatment services?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a good linkage, Commissioner. I'd have to learn more about it, but it makes sense for sure.
Because we're not trying to take away from the general fund.
Right.
This is specifically could be an opioid settlement fund use.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea.
That's-
Good idea.
So I have.
Tuesday morning brainstorming session.
So if that's our track, does that mean we leave it in here, or is that more of a direct? We call around to the legislators and try to find someone to bird dog it for us?
Well, I think at this point, we leave it in here just so we have it, again, as the talking point to say, you need to target those dollars. And I just think of, Representative Lauren Davis, I may give her a call. She might know too. She's from the West Side. She's very in tune with this. Yeah, so, but I would, make sure we leave it in, if we need to make a different category, for
I was just thinking
settlement
maybe
dollars,
have
we
a
could.
settlement dollar. That's Pat's world, he'll format.
Yeah, opioids, yeah.
Scott?
Well, and maybe this is back to if the desire is to have fewer targeted asks, so it gets more attention. This is one of the ones that the commissioners say, hey, we've got dollars and mental health dollars that we anticipate to close the gap. Commissioners have already put 5 on for opioids. We expect 3 from the feds, and so we have about a delta of maybe 7 million or so. But if the state is looking to place those settlement dollars in certain projects, we'd be happy to receive them. So it's not like we need these in order to finish a project, but we could certainly take them if you need to be able to deploy those dollars.
Right, which allows us to use the mental health dollars for other purposes, so, yeah. I think we need to kind of spin it on that approach.
And shape the argument so that they they think that the solution was their idea, not ours.
It's a win-win.
Yeah, give them an opportunity.
So then the Hilliard daycare that has been, as I've been told now, named Nova Hilliard. We thought it was gonna make it last year, and then in the end it did not. You don't recall who our prime,
I think Foltz and Schmidt are looking at both that, so. I know Suzanne for sure.
I know Pulse for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's why I think they're both, you know, even, it's kind of right on each other's boundaries. Two of the mics,
Yeah, it's in the 6th.
but.
It's very close, honestly, it's in the 6th, but it's close to the 3rd and it's close to the 4th. Tucked it just off, I mean, it's Wellesley between Market and Havana, or Haven.
are there specialized dollars, kind of off your theme on the opioid dollars, that we could request for daycare, or is it straight
Capital gains
general
tax,
fund?
if that survives the initiative, that's supposed to partly fund childcare
Oh, is it?
and school facilities.
But I do think they're looking at some capital that, like, there is a fund for childcare facility, there's capital dollars, and I'm not sure if they're looking to, I know last year, I think they were trying to kind of identify and get commitments that they would get some of those dollars, but I think that's a competitive process, so I'm not sure if they're just looking for a separate capital, you know, separate from the childcare fund or the childcare capital fund. So we probably need to just,
We'll research on that.
yeah,
I don't think they care where the money comes
Yeah.
from, as long as it spends.
So this is all about how do we make our ask as smart as possible to make it successful.
We may ask more questions as to where it could come from. You know. Nice. Just to have to take another call. Oh, well, because we're over,
Way over.
we're way over, so.
Trying to push us through.
Nice.
Number 7, sorry,
Go
no,
ahead.
you're the
No,
commissioner.
go ahead.
Number 7 were ones that I heard one commissioner kind of speak to each. When we had our last conversation, do they stay on? Are they more individual offices? Be pushing them this year? Do we leave them on?
Thoughts?
Well, it's in Richelli's district. And so I know that Volts and Richelli have been having conversations about this and stuff, so I'd say we leave it on and let them run with the ball.
Yeah, we're on to the next
What's that?
one. We're on to the next one.
I think, were you speaking Bellevue?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think he moved on to
Oh,
Bellevue.
I moved
Oh,
on.
sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
thank you, Bob.
What's Value asking for?
The water district.
That small water
Water
district
district
with.
up in 5
Oh,
Mile.
on 5 Mile.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Okay, the failing water system.
Is the one that if it gets fixed, I believe the city will annex it,
Right.
but they don't want to take on the capital cost of fixing, of course, it's multi-million.
Yeah,
yeah, the city is already providing water, but it's not officially in their system. And they need this money to be able to upgrade it so they can incorporate it into their system.
And I'm happy for us to support, but it's really the legislature that has to decide how they're gonna fund it. We have no funding capability. We're not water purveyors. Again, it's, you know, it's kind of, I don't want to get into that business. But we're happy to support the request to provide water for them.
Yeah, it's an awkward situation because it's technically in the county, unincorporated area, but it's gonna be the city of Spokane's water system. So I mean, ultimately the city of Spokane's gonna own it. So maybe what we do is coordinate and just support them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe with the waste to energy and that, we could check in with them on both of those for their agenda.
Conservation district, I mean, this is where we have to just, are we willing to do letters of support? I mean, we're not asking, I mean, I don't want to ask specifically for them, but I'm happy to give a letter of support. Just because I think with it being a tight financial year, it's one of those,
Less is more.
yeah.
So now conservation letter support YM up on the South Hill.
I don't even know if they're that far along
Yeah,
yet.
I think it was just something I threw out that at some point,
Even the hopper for next year
if
review.
we haven't heard from them, then I would hold that for next year.
Yeah, I recently just heard that they're raising 10, it's like a $70 million project.
So that's a lot.
It'd be
I'm sure
a-
the nuts are big, but
Long process.
does that close us on capital?
Yes.
I have a question. I don't know how much you want to discuss today, but on the clean buildings piece, do we want to narrow that into a more specific ask? And I'm thinking back to Gil's more recent presentation, where my impression was if you just ignore the legal piece, upgrades to our system that just so happen to comply also save us over the long term versus the status quo. So do we want to ask for something around like upfront costs to help get that moving? Just curious about that. Maybe a bigger conversation too. I don't know.
And for the commissioners, for the 35 million we have, it's about 11 for kind of switchgear infrastructure and 24 for kind of the steam conversion over to hot water and all of our air handling units, whatnot. So those are kind of the buckets, the two funding buckets that got accumulated to the 35.
Ask Gil what he thinks would be useful there.
Yeah, I think so, because I guess, Mike, you were talking about, if they're gonna be doing this study, and so people are kind of waiting on the Clean Buildings Act for another year, you know. I mean, I think it's good to keep it though in the forefront, that this is how much we think it's gonna cost.
We've got our study.
Well,
Their
Yeah.
upfront cost though.
Yeah.
Some of it depends on if somebody bites, like last year, Commissioner Jordan went to Billick, he bit. Can't do the whole campus, give me one building, we picked the Public Works, came up with about $1.5 million. I think that was our ask, we got 773, you know, so at some point. You just set the table and you kind of see how it plays out with interest. In legislators and what the buckets of money at the state look like in the competition and. How the budget gets closed.
See a bad thing, just continuing to have it there to keep it in the forefront and then knowing that there's this study that's gonna happen. You know, that's gonna show all the buildings across the state. Is that what, Mike? That's what you're looking at, that's the study that's gonna be coming out in a year.
Yeah, I do. And I think the specter of that study is going to, you know, in some ways delay, you know, firm action from the legislature on that. But that's my gut telling me that. I could certainly be talked out of that. And I think but I do think it's smart to leave it, you know, as sort of a placeholder and discuss that with legislators and see where they come out on it too.
Else on capital before we go to transpo. So I did a lot of slash and burn on transportation, so y'all can let me know if I did it correctly or not. We had 8 projects across 2 pages. We now have 3 projects across 3 inches of paper. So that was a big,
That's a big slash and burn.
big slash and burn. So you need to look, I've talked with Burgess about transportation. I've also meshed that with talking with Colton at the federal level on transportation. So kind of looking, also talking with Kyle and Zaracor, kind of looking at combining what commissioners have been talking about with what funding might be out there with meshing state and federal. This is where it landed. Like, I think everybody loves your arterial preservation program, but, you know, we already talked about on Thunder mandates. Argonne is deemed under some categories one of the worst in the state, isn't it, or county or something?
Certainly our worst.
It's so Argonne is a huge issue. To me, the nexus of Argonne with the Centennial Trail brings in some bike ped dollars, a little bit more interest than just a straight car project. So I thought that was a big one. I believe there's a study that just finished up, or it is finishing up. Finishing up, so realize we're probably not gonna get anything in transportation this year, but we want to keep some talking about. The Glen Rose corridor is another one that touches a couple different legislative districts, so kind of thinking of it from a political standpoint of who would have interest. It's another big one in the city. Four Lakes is one that the feds have talked about. We've received about $10 million from the feds towards it, so it's one that is moving along. Of course, it's, you know, kind of like our clean buildings. It's a really big nut, even though we've received a lot of money. And then the other projects just didn't have as much, that they were a little bit more local in my mind. That might not have as much interest from a lot of legislators. It might be something where we focus with one district. So that summarizes my biases on what's before you. Am I closed? We need to change it.
This because it's got a project in each one of the 3 rural areas and stuff, and so from that standpoint, you know, at least we've got some balance in terms of moving forward. I can't remember, maybe you can. We are in the final stages of adopting the priority list for SRTC. And I can't remember whether, I know that Four Lakes is on there, but I can't remember whether Glen Rose or Argonne is.
Confident Argonne is, I can't
Argonne
speak
is.
to Glen Rose.
Argonne is, okay.
And that's where I need to get Glen Rose and also the Sullivan intersection on SRTC's radar. Like, I don't know why that hasn't come up at SRTC, but
It's being driven by the TAC. And so
yes.
I am challenged sometimes by what they recommend.
Yeah, so I need to talk to Lois and see, I know she's speaking at Good Roads today at lunch, but those are, I mean, the Sullivan intersection, I mean, I don't like going there. I avoid
Sullivan and what?
Sullivan and Salties. It's kind of as 32nd comes around from Barker and into Salties. I mean, it's a really bad intersection, and we've got the high school there. We've got Morningside Heights, you know, that is getting further and further developed, and it's, I don't feel it's safe. I mean, I don't know what the traffic accidents are on there, but so that's the one I worry about because of the high school, you know, with high school kids driving, that it's just getting less safe. I see Ashley over there shaking her head. She must look at that.
It's my personal favorite because I drive that one the most, but.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just, I mean, so it's like at some point you gotta go, people aren't talking about it because they're not seeing, I don't know why they're not seeing the counts, but there's a lot of people that are coming from that area.
It's a blank corner.
And it's, yeah, it is a blank corner. It's just bad. So, I mean, that's why at some point we gotta figure out how to get these on the list, because if they're not on the list, we can't put them out for federal dollars.
Right.
And the state's not wanting to look at them either. And then Glen Rose is getting more, I mean, the traffic counts. I mean, we've got the new roundabout at Carnahan and Glen Rose. Especially if the Y goes in up there. It's just, it's not safe. I drive it a lot.
It's a major corridor.
It's a major corridor and there's no room for biking and running, and people bike and run on it all the time. And it's a hazard.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of the reasons I raised it. It's because I know that I think either next week or in December, we're gonna adopt the final list of priority projects and stuff, so, and I'm pretty sure neither one of those are on it and stuff, so that's why I say, if we want it, we need to get it on the list.
Yeah, we may just have to wait till next year to get it through the process, but I don't know how to. Yeah, emphasize to get it through the process, so, okay.
I love the tack.
I thought Wall Street was an ongoing project that was completed last year, but I think I was wrong on that. That's another reason I scratched that. I thought we were asking for additional funding last year to do more as we did that project. Is that one done, Kyle? So Greta to Whitworth part of Wall Street?
No, that's next year.
See, I was off on that one. But the reason I scratched that one was I thought it happened this summer. That was my mistake for the year.
Kyle, isn't that just the bike connections off of Wall Street? That's actually Wall itself.
Yeah, the bike project completed at the end of last year. It rolled over. There was a little bit into this year. This is now the actual.
Okay, so it's almost 10. We need to let Mike, we're already, I'm sorry, Mike, we're a half hour over on your time and we need to. Get
Oh, no, not at all. No.
So I think
We'll take the feedback we have and bring back a draft.
okay. Thank you, appreciate it.
If I
Thank you all, Commissioners.
further feedback, you let me know.
Mike, thanks. Great to see you and we'll see more of you soon. We'll see you then at the WASAC conference.
You'll see me there, yeah, unless we talk before this, so. Thank you all.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay. So Ashley, thank you for teaching me.
Oh, no, it's fine. I love this stuff. When I get to sit in and hear all this, it blows my mind how much you guys are all tasked with. It's fun to get out of the court world for a moment. So I'm here for a request to accept a grant. About 5 years ago, Spokane the state reached out to us and asked us to become a site for an early childhood court. And that is for people that are child welfare involved, coming into our courts. If they have a child that is from 0 to 3 years old, it's kind of another track that provides more supports for them. Studies show that birth to 3, the brain development is very important. And so those kids have more contact with the parents in a safe environment. Again, this is our 5th year. The grant fully supports one employee. One of the keystone to this early childhood court is a community coordinator that connects parents with resources out in the community, more so than other parents that are involved in child welfare get. There's no cost to the county for this program, and I would ask that next week the board allow Superior Court to continue to be a site for the early childhood court. And now you're back on track.
There we go, exactly.
Any questions?
Actually, Heather mentioned you guys had some conversation around indirects. Our practice is always to take indirects on these because we have costs, grant administration. So I think it allows for 10%. So is it fully cover the cost with taking indirects as well?
I have a meeting to discuss that with the employee. And I've reached out to HR to potentially have the community coordinator be a percentage employee so that I can stay within the grant. I know that 2025 is a rough year, and I certainly didn't want to come to the board and say that part of the general fund would pay for this employee. So that meeting, and we'll continue to explore whatever we need to, whether it be reducing her back to 37, but 7.5. I've got to do the math to see if that would keep us within the grant. But yeah, and I reached out to the grantors, and they do not have more funds that they could give us. Apparently, they already roll in a 2% increase each year, but I will make sure that the employee salary and benefits stays within the grant amount.
Yeah, just because we always take interest because we have those costs. We want to make sure we are able to do that.
Excellent.
Chris.
Which court commissioner has that docket?
It's now across all 7 teams. We expanded so that it doesn't matter what zip code you're in, you can participate in this program.
So then the coordinator kind of follows the cases regardless of what docket they're on.
Yep.
It's great.
We did start with a narrow scope to kind of get it going, and now that we felt like we could put it across all teams, so available all throughout the county.
And how active is that coordinator in the court process versus the kind of behind the scenes meetings, case direction, and everything?
She's much more involved in the case direction but behind the scenes, she does try to go to all of the docket calls if there's a early childhood court participant on that docket. All right.
Okay, thank you.
all.
Appreciate it.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
What, go next?
Baby court.
Devin Powell.
Good morning. This is in discussion of a interlocal agreement with the city of Spokane for waste disposal at the waste energy facility. Timely since we discussed it earlier.
Okay, good morning, happy election day. All of
You
it.
to say.
It is, I know.
Stressful for all of us.
Especially Josh and I.
Come on.
Well, I hope it turns out as just as you like. We're just here today for approval to extend our interlocal agreement with the city of Spokane. We've also made a couple amendments. These are our new disposal rates that we have in this agreement. Waste to energy at $65 a ton, bypass, which is just a landfill, the Adams County landfill, we're at $63.82 a ton. Next slide. We did make a couple little changes in the contract or the agreement.
So I'm gonna just ask, before you go to this slide, what was the comparison to what was it?
The waste to energy,
Last year. Previous rate 23.
yeah, I'm sorry, that's the previous rate is 65. I apologize, there's a mistake on that. So we are currently paying 65 to the waste to energy now, and it will go up the CPI rate. I think it's 66.72 a ton. Something like that. So it's gone up a little bit. That is our bypass rate, and then in January, it will go up to a 3% increase on that 63.82.
Okay, so
But these are
They're-
current for
yeah.
November 17th is when
and then
those
it's
are.
going up.
Yeah.
by CPI.
Yeah, full.
So the agreement that will be, you want us to sign is for the next,
It goes from November 2024 through November in November 2025.
Last year, when we updated it, we realigned the dates to coincide with the takeover of our operations. So it's not really on the calendar year, but those CPI increases are.
Yeah, so CPI increase will come in January. I should have put that in there. Okay. Thank you for that question. I was going ahead of myself here. Next slide, please. Thanks. So yes, extended through the November 17th, 2025. We updated some language regarding their current disposal contract they use through Waste Management. And they have a subcontractor transport. We just kind of made that generic so we didn't have to change it every time. It gives also the change that we put in there is it gives both the county and the city their right to their own disposal options, as long as it's within the flow control agreement. And we're looking at different options to make our disposal to the landfill more efficient and more cost effective. So we wanted to make sure we had that option in the interlocal agreement.
No, it just historically, the language was very prescriptive and the city actually managed our waste on its way to landfill. Now we're giving ourselves more control over that.
And it also takes off the overhead for them. They don't have to monitor that our waste going to a landfill. We're doing it ourselves.
So the only question I have is on the CPI adjustment, is that I can't remember in that agreement, is that a calculated CPI? Okay,
Yeah.
so it doesn't have any relationship to what the city increases their rate. It's all separate. Terrific.
Yes, and
That's, I thought it was like that, but I couldn't remember for sure.
I think the numbers just came out because the numbers we used to calculate starting January are
Yeah.
through October of this year, so.
Okay.
We'll be able to get that price if anyone wants to see it. And we're just here, the next slide, just basically we're asking for approval when it comes in front of you next week. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're probably just gonna stay there.
Mhm.
Okay, so we got Ben and Amy.
Yeah, thank you, Ben Bradabo. And we have two items today. The first one, Amy Sumner is gonna cover.
Good morning. So yeah, we advertised an RFP for laboratory analytical services for our toxic sampling out at the Spokane County Regional Water Reclamation Facility for both our influent and effluent. This is required by our NPDES permits. We received 3 responses to the RFP. All the labs had the technical capabilities. The primary difference was in their costs, which range from $27,000 to $36,000 per year. We are recommending to go with Pacific Rim Laboratories, which was the lowest cost bid. And we're just requesting that you approve us to move to contract and hire Pacific Rim Lab. Any questions?
This is specific sampling for the TMDL that came out last week. This is the sampling that is measuring those low levels. So we have to go out to a specialty lab for this work. And it's part of that we've been doing for a decade or so.
This will be a 5-year agreement. Previously, we had a really weird contractual mechanism where it was a 1-year renewal for, I think it was like 15 years. So we're trying to correct that by going with a 5-year term.
I see, up to 200,000 over the 5 years. How often are they testing? Like, how many tests does that buy us, I guess?
Right, so we do quarterly testing of our influent at the NBI and SBI and then our effluent. So there's 3 times 2, because there's 2, so I don't know, roughly 22 samples per year quarterly. Well, not 22 quarterly, but.
Thank you.
That fine tuning of analysis is around 1,200 a sample.
Okay. And this low level that we've talked about in the TMDL, and it requires us to take clean water from the lab, do nothing with it, send it into the lab to get tested. It takes us to have clean water, pour it between bottles and send it back as essentially as checks on, is the environment causing contamination? Is our equipment causing contamination? All this really low level. So we end up with more samples than we typically would for standard wastewater sampling, but that's part of this that causes the expense to be very high. If there's no questions on that, we're on to the next item. This is for the Newman Lake Flood Control Zone District. presentation of the assessment.
We all can leave, can't we?
What do we do here, Ron?
The board's tied today.
Like, yeah, that's why he's dressed up.
It's even like day.
So this is the board approved the budget for 2025. There was no increase from the previous year. And then this is just how the costs get distributed through the district. And it's a presentation of that. And so there's 1,700 parcels in the district. About 750 of them pay to this, and it ranges from $2 to $3,000, an average of $420 per parcel. And there's a calculation of how that's determined. And so from this briefing, we'll have our intent is to have a resolution to set the public hearing date. The resolution will be in front of you on November 12th, and then the public hearing date would be December 10th. And then the details of the assessments are this slide, which is better presented in the next slide. Ron, if you go to the next slide, this is the distribution of the costs. And this is a comparison to last year. 2025 is in orange and 2024 is in blue, and it really follows the same distribution. There's a lot of them at the very low end, less than $100. And then there's a few that are above $1,400 at the high end. Any questions?
You've gotten much feedback, either one of you, Teresa?
No, we have not. We've presented the budget to the advisory committee and then presented it at a public meeting prior to board approval. We're working through the ARP project, our contractor is mobilizing to the site this week, I believe, to start construction. But haven't had any comments on the assessments.
EV was positive, right?
Towards the budget, yes. Yep. And then this is just how it gets allocated by property.
So the assessments really aren't changing.
They're not changing. They're individually, they may change the individual people. If somebody did a large improvement that was captured and their value of their house went up, it would then, theirs might go up and then someone else's might go down. But the total recovered is exactly the same. Or the total assessed is exactly the same. And the distribution changes a little bit. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, that's gonna take us to Scott.
Good morning, commissioners. We have before you today a fairly straightforward request. It's one of those anomalies that planning processes, but we really don't handle it. We're not responsible for it yet. It's assessor's issue. And it revolves around the farm and ag conservation program. Next slide, please, Ron. What this is you can see the basics up here under 8434. It provides an opportunity for landowners to get up to a 50% tax deferral for properties that have or could be used in agriculture, but are no longer being used that way because of aging property owners or conditions. This allows them to get move it from an ag tax classification into an ag conservation tax classification for a period of time until they sell or reinstitute it into agriculture. It's based on a point rating system. The Planning Commission acts as the county's rating board in this case, and their recommendation was to move these 4 projects forward. We've got the detail on all of these projects has been in your packet. We've got some extra slides if you'd like to go through them, but it's fairly straightforward. They go through a rating based on their ability, on the quality of the land, on what has been done before, on their willingness to maintain weed control programs during the time of conservation. And then the result is if this land sells for some reason before it goes back into ag, or sells and does not go back into ag, those tax deferrals are recaptured. So there's a kind of a backdoor part of this as well, but it does allow property owners to stay on their property and pay a reduced, up to 50% reduced tax rate until such time as that land comes back into agriculture. There are 4 of these. This past year, the planning commission met, deliberated on all 4 and is recommending the approval of all 4 to the board. I'm happy to go through them one by one if you'd like, or if not, I'm happy to take some questions.
How often are these parcels inspected to make sure that they stay in compliance?
I don't know. It's kind of up to the assessor's office to run that weed control program. But if they do not apply, they are withdrawn from the program.
And if they're withdrawn from the program, they're not required to pay the back taxes, they're just put on the assessment rolls for future taxes.
No, if the same property owner leaves the program, they have to pay back their deferred taxes.
They do. Okay.
Sorry, how many did you say that there were total?
There are 4 applicants. One of the applicant had multiple parcels.
Oh, that's why I was like, there's a lot of parcels in here. Okay, got it.
And, you know, unlike a comprehensive plan amendment, the parcels do not need to be contiguous, just under common ownership.
Got it.
They said, once, if you approve on this, we hand it off to the assessor's office to monitor and work on compliance.
Questions or comments? Thank you, Scott.
Thanks,
That
Commissioner.
was pretty easy.
Sometimes we get to do things briefly, not often in our business, but sometimes.
Yeah, we're now back on time. Look at that. So Commissioner Jordan, do you want to go or do you
Sure.
want to, do you have a guest coming?
Yes, I'm sure they'll be here soon. I think Chrissy went out to check. I can just get started. And I'll scoot down here like I'm presenting, which
Oh, look at that.
that'd be fun.
You waiting for someone?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're at the front
Oh,
counter.
okay. I'm just gonna pass out an updated ordinance proposal, Amber.
Oh.
I just been chatting with Mr. Maceo and Mr. Folsom, so it made some kind of technical.
It's about
Oh, good timing.
housing and properties.
We're just about to get started. Well, thank you, Madam Chair and the board for setting aside some time for this topic today. I'm joined by Michelle and Dana from Habitat for Humanity as well, just to share some thoughts that they may have as a community provider about this issue. But first of all, just wanted to thank the board for agreeing a couple of weeks back to put a pause on the sale of the Scope House on Evergreen in the Valley, just so we could take a little bit of time to explore this issue further as the commissioners. I just want to let you know I have been working, as I mentioned, with Mr. Folsom and Mr. Maceo, gathering some staff feedback. So I provided a PowerPoint as well as a draft ordinance. I just handed out some updates to the ordinance, which I will go into in the presentation. Can you go to the slideshow, Ron? And as we know, just starting out, this is really a proposal for an ordinance that would allow the county to dispose of surplus properties for affordable housing purposes. We do have the Evergreen House on our 2 o'clock agenda today. So the board can certainly make whatever decision it wants to make with regard to that property. The ordinance could be considered in addition. So there's really no reason why the board couldn't decide to sell that on the open market if that's the will of the board, and still adopt an ordinance consistent with the RCW that I'll talk about. Just wanted to say as well that I really appreciate all the county staff over the past couple of weeks who've been chatting with me, sharing their feedback, and I'll get into that as well. So what is this all about? The goal here is to give Spokane County the option or the choice to be able to dispose of unused or unneeded county-owned properties in order to promote the development of affordable housing units. The ordinance that I've prepared does not require the county to make that choice. It just unlocks the ability for us to have that choice. if, as we look to dispose of or sell surplus properties. It's really just allowing the county to have one more tool in our toolbox as we make those choices, and one more tool to promote affordable housing as well. Next slide, Ron. So I've just asked the board, I'm going to go through various pieces of the need for affordable housing, how this is consistent with our other goals. I'll summarize the ordinance, talk about some examples from other jurisdictions, let Habitat share their perspective, and then any county employees as well. So I'm hoping that we'll get your questions answered as we go through. And then there's a time for the end for discussion. So just globally, we all know as the board that there is a significant need for more development of affordable housing at the state level. This is information from the Department of Commerce that I think we've all seen, that says that the lack of affordable housing options has reached critical levels in communities throughout the state. And as we know, as we look to our 2026 comprehensive plan update, Spokane County needs around 71,000 additional homes over the next 2 decades to keep up with the new demand. Next slide, please. And when you break that down, I think a lot of us have seen this slide as well from the Department of Commerce, that as we look out over the next 20 years at those homes that we need, the majority of the need forecasted out is for families who make lower than at or below 80% of area median income. So the greatest level of need as we look out is really in those lower income families. And that's where a lot of the gap is. And I think that hopefully this could be one small tool in a variety of creative strategies to try to move the needle on that. Next slide, please. When we look at Spokane County specifically, according to our local data, we know as the commissioners that there are thousands of families in our county who are significantly burdened by housing costs. Over 6,000 renters have rent that is over 50% of their family income, which is a lot of pressure on the family budget. Over 5,500 homeowners with mortgage and housing costs that go above 50% of their income. Next slide, please. These are a snapshot of our affordable housing program goals that are currently in effect at the county. One of our stated goals that we've approved is increase the supply of affordable housing with a primary focus on housing for low, very low, and extremely low income families. And the other goal is support public, private, and nonprofit organizations in addressing affordable housing needs. We have George from our Housing and Community Services, Housing Community Development Department here to share any thoughts he might have later on. But we know George's office is working on gathering community input, fine-tuning our RFP process, and that we'll continue to hone in on specific goals going forward. But I just wanted to share what we've already stated our goals are. Next slide, please. Also appreciate Mr. Chesney's feedback, our planning director, on this ordinance as well. Just wanted to share that our current comprehensive plan has a housing section that states that the primary focus of that particular element of the plan is mechanisms to increase the availability of affordable housing for lower income and special needs households. We know that the state passed HB 1220 a couple of years back, which requires local governments to plan for and accommodate housing for all income levels as we look to comprehensive plans. And so creative tools that give us one more way to help remove barriers to development of affordable housing is consistent with our current comp plan, almost certainly where we're going in our comprehensive plan update, as well as some of the direction from the legislature from the past couple of years. Next slide, please. So what's the point of this proposal? One challenge in that we often hear from developers of affordable housing is a barrier is the cost of land. Land is expensive and it can be in demand and hard to get a hold of, and that can impact the ability for affordable housing projects to pencil out. on the nonprofit side. So can unused public properties be just one part of a solution? That's what we're here to talk about. Just to clarify, surplus property, I know we all know that, is really referring to real property that is no longer needed, that is owned by the county. So Deb Firkins is our real estate officer. She's responsible for keeping an inventory of all the properties that the county owns. And then when a property comes up in her world that it looks like there's just no more need for, she checks in with the various departments and comes before the board, and the board can declare it unneeded surplus and move forward with disposing it from there. And the law does allow local governments to discount these surplus properties to assist with affordable housing. Next slide. This is the RCW 3933015, transfer, lease, disposal of public property for affordable housing purposes that we're here to talk about. State law passed in 2018. It does allow for an alternative choice when local governments go to dispose of these properties for a particular, what the law calls public benefit purpose. And you can all read the RCW if you'd like. The bottom line is that the municipality must adopt its local rules in order to actually implement or have access to that choice. So the law says you can do it if you pass a local policy allowing yourselves that ability. So the adoption of a local ordinance just unlocks what the state law allows us to do. Next slide, please. Just since the board briefly discussed this a couple weeks ago, Chrissy and I have been doing some research with the help of the prosecutor's office just to figure out what other municipalities across the state have taken advantage of this option. It varies from West Side, Central Washington, East Side, City, County, anywhere from Douglas County in the center of the state to the city of Yakima up to Snohomish County on the west side. And these are just the ones that we were able to identify just from looking at news articles, snooping around to various county codes. There may be others, so I don't claim this as an exhaustive list, just really what we were able to find and kind of parse through, read through their ordinances and codes. Next slide. This is just one example of what's possible from Whatcom County. This is a senior affordable housing apartment complex called the Laurel Forest Apartments in Whatcom County. It has a child care facility on the main floor with senior affordable housing units up above. The article says leaders, planners, future tenants unite to celebrate new Bellingham senior housing. An article from this year, and just wanted to let the board know that this was a county-owned property that this apartment complex was built on. The county transferred it to a nonprofit called the Opportunity Council. They invoked the same RCW that I'm talking about today. And then of course, the developer then brought together all sorts of funding sources, including low-income housing tax credits from the federal government in order to make that project work. And it's built, and there's people living there today. I think if you go on the website, it says they're full, or if you call the phone number, but the ability for the county land to be made available at a discounted rate was part of the mix that made that project pencil out and be successful. There are lots of examples of other avenues, other places where the basic principle of unneeded government land or underutilized or blighted being discounted to help pencil an affordable housing project is part of making these projects successful. I know the board is aware that we got a letter from Thrive International supporting the principle here. They have an ongoing project with the county library, which is similar. Again, the same basic principle. The exact legal mechanisms might be different depending on whether it's a library district or what the exact situation is. But the basic idea is to unlock more avenues to make these projects successful. Next slide. So I've got a proposed ordinance. Chrissy and I really read all these different options from across the state. We tried to take the feedback initially that we heard from the board a couple of weeks ago and put together a simple but sufficiently protective draft. Here's some of the key elements of that. Again, this is a proposal, so I'd love your feedback on it, what you think, what questions you have at the end. Number one is rely on our county experts. We have our housing department, which does such great work in this space. The ordinance contemplates that George's office would weigh in on whether surplus properties are potentially suitable for affordable housing, and the board could take that recommendation or not. As in addition, well, that's the first piece, just rely on our experts. Number two is an open RFP process administered by George's department. So we want to make sure that, as I heard other commissioners say, there's a level of fairness here. We don't, we just want it to be open, competitive, available for everybody, transparent. So that's built into the ordinance. The next piece is no gifting of the properties. That is allowed by the RCW, and that might have actually been what happened with that Laurel Forest property. But I think the board probably wants to have some level of cost consciousness and cost benefit to this discussion. And so I just took that out of the ordinance, that we would be really talking about discounting, not necessarily giving away. The next piece, just to let the board know, there are definitions in the ordinance that I put in there about what is affordable housing, what is public benefit. Those are set by state law. So I can talk about what those are, but they are really just parroting what the RCW says. And then the last kind of element is protections to ensure that the property is actually used for the public benefit purpose. That's also required by RCW. George's department, as I understand it, already has a robust monitoring program when the board funds an affordable housing project. There can be monitoring fees that are part of the deal that the recipient of the funds or the property pays in order to help George's department monitor over time to ensure that the property remains in use for affordable housing. So in terms of that, those are kind of features of the ordinance, but just very briefly to give you the step-by-step. It would be, basically the ordinance says that the real estate officer briefs the board whenever we have a potential surplus property. Every time there's a potential surplus property identified, the real estate officer would consult with the housing department. In other words, just run it by George. His team would give a thumbs up or thumbs down on whether this property might be a suitable candidate for an affordable housing agreement. And that recommendation would also be then presented to the board in that briefing. And then if the board chooses, which we would have the choice to proceed with a disposition for affordable housing, then there would be an open RFP process administered by George's department, and his department could make recommendations to the board as to what the terms and conditions of that contract would be. In speaking with George, there's lots of different possibilities here. And his department would be happy, I understand, to work on some kind of decision-making matrix, scoring guide to kind of formalize how to compare different proposals that might come forward. That's basically it in a nutshell. Those are the highlights of it. Oh, I did want to note that there is definitely, my understanding of our legal position and current law is that certain properties are just not good candidates for this, such as road fund properties. And so I worked with Jim to create some language that kind of covers that this would not be used for properties where there's some other legal barrier to prevent it from being done. So I think that that's been addressed as well in the ordinance. That's a little outline for you. Just to clarify, affordable housing, really from the state definition, it's, as I understand it, this is dealing with low or very low income people by this RCW. It's housing that is available to folks who make 80% or below of AMI. And then there's a definition piece that speaks to what is the rent or what is the mortgage, which is 30% or below of household income for renting families, or 38% or below for a home ownership piece. That's my understanding of the RCW. So next slide, please. Just to remind the board, we've had letters of support from SNAP, Family Promise, Thrive, and Habitat. And then I'll turn it over to Habitat just to share your thoughts.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Commissioner. My name is Michelle Gerardo. I'm the CEO at Habitat for Humanity Spokane. This is Dana Leroy. He's our new policy and advocacy coordinator. Ellen around with me today. This is really exciting. This is a really exciting opportunity. I think that we are all familiar with the struggle that we're seeing in trying to make affordable housing and affordable homeownership a reality. And it seems like every time we finally think we've cracked the code, the market shifts, and here we are back at trying to solve for that moving target. My perspective on this is that it really could open the door to not only nonprofits like Habitat, but also for smaller affordable housing providers that are just starting to get their foot through the door. That Evergreen property, that was textbook Habitat rehab acquisition home. But the struggle that we find is if we purchase a home at market rate, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to pencil out for the low income home buyer. And so we have to really look at how do we layer this in a way that will not only be an asset for a low income home ownership opportunity, but also isn't going to break the bank on our books. So by providing donated or discounted property, we can ensure that any upgrades that need to happen to the home, adherence to Evergreen standards, ensuring that there's energy efficiency so we aren't passing along another debt to someone else. That's a game changer for us. Oftentimes we have between 5 and 7 layers of financing to make happen for a low income home buyer. In Spokane County, we've completed over 430 homes, and all of those families are below 80% of the area median income. They qualify just like you qualify for a bank loan. The trick with Habitat, though, is not only is it an affordable mortgage below 30% of their monthly income, we also provide permanent affordability. So that means that no matter what, that home must be sold to another family that's below 80% of the area median income. And we do that through the Habitat Land Trust. The other cool tool about that is that we use it as a subsidy. So a few years ago, land was easy to come by. It just was. And I cannot believe the day when we woke up the next morning and saw, holy smokes, a single family lot is $80,000, $120,000. We've just said goodbye to half of our pipeline in terms of affordability. So by removing that piece of it and using that, that land value as a subsidy, we can bring that cost of home down. And then that family will still be able to have an asset and gain equity to step into market rate housing when they choose to purchase their next home. And we're able to steward the families in our pipeline to purchase that home from that previous Habitat homeowner. You might know us from, new construction. We do a lot of new construction. We rely heavily on volunteer labor, but Habitat not only builds homes, but we build communities. And part of building that community is ensuring that when homes or properties are starting to fall into blight, we can come in and provide and collaborate with that community to revitalize and ensure that all of those property values are maintained or even increased. Here's an example of some of the things that we've done in the city of Spokane. These units were, so there's 2 next to each other on the left-hand side. Those were units that were previously on a lot that was going to be a car wash. The community came together and said, no, these are historic, these are beautiful. How do we salvage these, move them to these other lots? And then it became very difficult. How do we transform this? How do we ensure that it's going to be cost effective? Habitat was able to receive these through receivership through the city of Spokane. And that was a very discounted price. and transform them. So on the right-hand side, that picture was just taken a few weeks ago. That family moved into their Habitat home in 2021. That home is on a land trust, so that home must be resold to a low-income family. And it's totally transformed that entire block. And so in thinking about the costs associated with some of these properties that may not be worthwhile any longer to municipalities or to the county, consider affordable housing. It can be really transformative. Since then, this family has started a business just off of Monroe. We're right in their neighborhood. It's a furniture sales, and that family's thriving. And they are pulling themselves out of the generational poverty that they were previously in and into economic mobility. So the opportunity to be really transformative exists. And this is but one tool that could really help affordable housing providers like Habitat get more families across the finish line.
Thank you. Thanks for the work that you guys do. I'm sure once we get to kind of the discussion and the board has any questions, you can certainly ask. So next slide, please, Ron. Just wanted to point out, of course, we all know if we place a surplus property that's owned by the general fund up on a public option, there's a clear benefit to having the proceeds from that sale. There's also a benefit to another choice, discounting for affordable housing. As you just heard, stabilizing families and kids who might not otherwise have an option available to them. The more affordable housing that low and very low income families have access to, they have more disposable income for that family budget to be spent on other things that help the economy. If there's a building that goes on depending on the property and project type, there's construction jobs, increased tax revenue if there's a development that increases the value of that property. And then for every family that gets into affordable housing and doesn't slip into homelessness, there's a reduced demand on our homeless response system as well. Next slide, please. Just wanted to, in kind of closing here before handing it off to other input, this is not an end all be all. We're really talking about having an option to make a choice when a general fund surplus property comes up. And so, but it's in my view, it's just a common sense ability to look critically and decide, does that make sense in any particular case? I also want to let the board know real quick, back to the different jurisdictions that have done this. There's a variety of ways it can be done. In my view, I looked at the city of Spokane's process for surplus properties and affordable housing. It is layered thick with bureaucracy, committees, reviews, studies, plans. It's just really burdensome, frankly. And I tried to write the ordinance to be very much in line with our process here at the county, to be minimally burdensome on Deb and the real estate officer. I appreciate George's office's willingness to kind of jump in and carry some of the work on this. It's very much in line with what they already do. And then I guess I'll just turn it over to George or Scott if there are anything I missed or anything you wanted to add from your department, or Deb too, if she's here. George?
Yeah, I think one thing I wanted to point out is those West Central homes that Michelle had highlighted there. Matt was a big part of that.
I know.
I was a big part of that, and so was Michelle, so it's kind of cool to see how that all evolved over time. That ironic that the three of us are sitting in.
Yeah, it's great to hear the story of the family.
Cool, right?
Too, so great.
Yeah. And yeah, really our department, everything that Commissioner Jordan's been talking about, as he and I have met, it's consistent with work that we're doing within our department. So we're happy to facilitate and support the commissioners on their wishes for this.
Can you speak to how the impact on the general fund could be minimized depending on what affordable housing funding was out there, depending on the case?
So important.
Take Chris's seat.
So I think there are so many different options of what we can do here. So I think one thing, as I spoke with Commissioner Jordan, we have, as you all know, a lot of grant funding that comes through to support affordable housing and homelessness. So there are ways that we can support the transfer of some of these properties in a way that does not have a negative or adverse impact at all to the general fund. So let's say a property is valued, assessed at $300,000. That's something that we could acquire with grant funds. Also something that we could do to leverage, like the case over here with these homes that we saw on the slide. I think that our contribution to that was $45,000-ish, something like that.
2 units.
Yeah, and Habitat for Humanity was able to leverage other match resources, their sweat equity, other sorts of things to be able to make that a much more expensive project pencil out. So there are various ways of how we can support this and make sure that any department that had acquired these properties in the past are made whole. So I guess ultimately I would just say flexibility to support the desires of the commissioners is what we can provide.
Thank you. Got anything to add? Come on up.
As you know, the GMA rules have changed for affordable housing, and we're looking at allocating housing among all of the jurisdictions in the county by income band in this current go round. You've seen the first run on what they call the HAP, the Housing for All planning tool. This is certainly consistent and provides an implementation tool for that once those zoning regulations are in place. And we would certainly anticipate a more flexible zoning environment so that if there was a piece of county land in an area that could be used for housing, but might now have a commercial or a light industrial zone in 26, those will probably be incorporated in more of a neighborhood zoning concept anyway. So this is a perfectly compatible add-on to what we're doing or what you're going to be doing for updating the comprehensive plan. So we would support it continually.
Kyle, does Deb, she around, or do you have any input you want to add?
No, just that she's provided some feedback on this with regards to disposition and working with George teams, as well as discussion about adequate language that attorney added with regards to the road fund and those properties not being applicable.
Next slide, please. So happy to have a discussion with the board, if folks are comfortable. Again, this is just the ordinance to allow choices to be made. It could need to be set for public hearing because it's a code change. So that would be the request. Next slide, please. Or if there's discussion, any improvements that we could make to the ordinance to address any questions. So that's it.
Questions or comments? Sure. So I have if you're saying, because my issue is we're in a tight budget. I mean, so we're potentially laying off people because we don't have budget, to take care of everybody. And so if we have the opportunity to have this, the house that's going to be on today's agenda, to sell it, it'll be auctioned so people will be able to bid on it. But that's money coming into our general fund that we don't have that can help support services that our citizens want. So if there's a way that a grant funding can come in to purchase something like that, this is a single family home versus are you taking over multiple multifamily homes that we could be using those dollars for? And how are we getting the best benefit for those dollars? So I guess just because we have the opportunity to use grant funds doesn't always mean it's the best case for those grant funds. So I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, and I think so much of it depends on the valuation of a home, kind of to what Michelle was speaking to earlier. Is there enough capacity in that property, and is the property in reasonable enough condition that it won't cost a lot of money? Like those West Central homes, we were able to get those at such a reduced rate through receivership. In that example, there was the capacity to be able to put in significant investment and still make it pencil, if you will.
And so those homes were in a receivership, so it wasn't that much of a cost to the city.
In that particular case, typically through receivership, you have to sell it at the fair market value. But the primary lien holder agreed that we could use it for affordable housing, so they basically took a hit on their proceeds.
So it wasn't the city that was taking the hit, it was the
The city
lien holder.
doesn't step into ownership when they sell as receivership. It's a third-party sale.
Thank you.
You know, the cost of affordable housing right now, a unit of affordable housing, depending on kind of what the capital stack looks like. If you've got tax credits that are going into it, we're looking at over $300,000 a unit in a lot of cases. So I think the investments, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? I think that's kind of the point of the ordinance, and having our department come into play to look at it and say, does it really make sense for this property to move forward? So using the Evergreen as the most current example, that one would probably be pretty tight because it's got enough value and everything else. I don't know if that one passes through our staff review threshold. We haven't developed a threshold for review at this point, but I envision, as I was talking with Commissioner Jordan, some type of a matrix. So we've got consistency across all the parcels or properties that come through to make a determination on yes, commissioners, we think based on these criteria that this is something that you all should look at as an affordable housing, or no, for these reasons, we think it's not good. Thinking back to Pavel's housing tool to say, is this a good deal? Is this not a good deal? Doing something similar to that. So yeah, so much is going to depend on the property as to whether or not it makes sense.
And it sounds like too, how the property comes to be fruition too, so.
And I would just kind of add as well that the ordinance as written, even if the your department said this seems like it could be a viable candidate for affordable housing, the board could say, thanks for that. We are in a tight budget situation. We just need to move forward and sell it. So it preserves the discretion of the board to proceed with kind of the typical process, if that's what's needed for other reasons, such as tight budget.
So I think my history with Habitat for Humanity goes back almost 20 years to the property that we acquired over at Feltz Field for the homes that we built over there. Then Highland Village, where we just finished another. So my comments are not related to the good work you do. So don't take them that way, please.
Oh, I don't know.
Philosophically, the Growth Management Act was flawed from the very beginning because it limited the amount of land available for residential development. And even in Economics 101, you learn about supply and demand. And if you limit the supply, the cost goes up. And it has gone up systematically every single year. And that's one of the contributing factors that has made affordable housing unrealistic for just about every jurisdiction in the state. I don't care whether you're the other side or this side, it's across the board because it's state law. And then on top of that, if that wasn't bad enough, then the legislature keeps on piling on with building permits, impact fees. In fact, just a month ago, I had a conversation with Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck, and he was complaining about the fact that in I think it's Snohomish County, they now have $85,000 impact fee on every single family home. But here in Spokane, we have a building code that's added $30,000 to $50,000 impact fees that range depending upon what part of the city you're in, from 30 to 65,000. So I mean, we're funding a flawed system, and so I guess I'm going to speak on behalf of the other 549,000 residents in the city that did pay their taxes and are looking for us to be good stewards of the assets of the county that, you know, I'm not in a position to where I'm gonna be supporting giving away property. But there are other tools that are available to us, and we've used them successfully. TIF is a great example. We got affordable housing at Liberty Lake. Jim Frank is doing that up at Costco. I proposed doing it down at Geiger. That got high-sided because folks didn't want to support the TIF. But wait a minute, that would have paid for reducing cost for housing. So I don't want to see, and I'm not going to support, putting into place more programs that will subsidize bad decisions. And that's what we're doing, is we're subsidizing bad decisions. If you want to lower the cost of housing, change the policies that raise the cost. But don't start tapping into other people's pockets. I appreciate the fact that you're talking about bringing grant money to the table. That makes affordable housing possible. And it respects the fact that we got property owners that are paying their taxes and are in housing. And some of them are struggling, clearly not in a position where they can subsidize others to get into a struggling situation. So there might be a mix here of different tools, but to gift money, to gift property from the general fund to support a project like this, I'm gonna have a lot of difficulty with. Because I got a duty to the other taxpayers in the county that are paying their taxes and are expecting us to be good stewards of their tax dollars. And I'm not gonna be in a position where I can just give that away. But maybe there's a balance, and I'd be more than happy to look at the balance, but not the subsidy.
So just to clarify, Commissioner Jordan, you were proposing that there would be some skin in the game. That we wouldn't be transferring property outright to someone who wanted to develop affordable housing.
Correct.
Okay. And we're talking about land that's owned by the county that we can choose what to do with, and this would just give us a choice. If there was a particular piece of property that was vacant and in a really great location, and we wanted to partner with Habitat or the Housing Authority or some other affordable housing developer, this would just drive down potentially the cost of the land for that entity to be able to bring those units to our community.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I think it's, I had a conversation with Commissioner Cooney last year because I wasn't aware that this had passed when I wasn't aware of it when I was at the city, because I think it passed after at the state level. And I just think it's a great tool to have in our toolbox. So I would definitely support having a hearing. Again, there's no expectation. I think the city's had it on the books, and I don't know how many times the city has used it. I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm just saying it's on the books and it's a tool. And I think it would be good to have a tool. I actually looked up on Spokane Trends, and you can go on Spokane Trends to see all of the data on from our community. And for renting households, we're up to 22,000 people last year in Spokane County spent 50% or more on their housing. And that's 28% of renters, so almost 1 out of 3. And that's higher than the state or the United States, according to Spokane Trends. And I think there was about 10% of homeowners that are in that category, which is a lot. There's a lot of homeowners in our county. So I think it's a good tool, and I appreciate all the work that you put into it, Commissioner Jordan. So I would support at least putting out for a hearing so we could hear from the community to see if they think that we should adopt it.
And I'll just say I hear what you're saying, Commissioner French. I appreciate your openness to that balance, because I would just suggest that passing the ordinance as written allows us to bring that analysis to bear. Right now, under law, we have to sell at appraised value for a surplus property. This would allow us to basically have a discount and then potentially look at bringing grant funds to fill that delta. So it's really just about giving us a wider menu of choices under the legal framework that we have. No requirement. The board would retain full discretion to make whatever is the most fiscally responsible decision. But by opening up the options, we really allow George's team to get creative in ways that may be able to enhance how we bring those grants and other resources to bear. So.
Yeah, and the county owns real estate as a fiduciary for the taxpayers. It's not our land, it's not our money, it's the money of the taxpayers. And so a lot of times the conversation gets confused. Well, the county has all of this. No, we are fiduciaries on behalf of the public. It's not our land. If it was, and you want to go out and buy land and give it to Habitat, God bless you. I'll be there and help you with the closing. But you're using your money. You're not using taxpayer money. That's the difference that I'm trying to demonstrate. You know, if we really wanted to make a difference, you know, and you have, the condo development regulations allow people to get into home ownership. You know, I've said this a number of times, you know, you don't have to look far if you want to look at data to see how much the Growth Management Act has failed. 2000, 2010, 2020, every 10-year cycle, the percentage of home ownership for communities of color has dropped every 10 years. Why is that? Bad policy. So let's change the policy. Let's get rid of the obstacles that get in the way of them being able to build affordable housing. So it's not just money and it's not just giveaways, but I'll say it again, I'll be happy to work with George and say, we got grant money. In fact, when I was at the neighborhood level, we actually, you remember the HUD Dollar Home program? I led the effort to get one of those dollar homes, and we remodeled it as a neighborhood and then resold it. And that's how we got funding to fund programs at the neighborhood level. So I can't preach about not taking advantage of those programs. I did. But that's a different environment than what we have right now. The high cost is imposed by bad policy. And I don't want to continue to fund bad policy with taxpayer dollars if we can avoid it. So not that I have an opinion, because I really don't.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What happens if the market changes? What happens if the market swings back to, you know, a time where we are seeing then a drop in values? Does that sway any opinion? Or if we see a time where, you know, there's not just a housing crisis, but a foreclosure crisis? Does that change any opinion on?
So where we take advantage of that is the auction block. Because as the treasurer forecloses for default taxes or mortgage lender defaults, that sells at a fire sale. And there's where you get the value of exactly what you're talking about.
I would say I appreciate all your efforts on this, because yes, Kimber brought it up a year ago, and
Because some folks from West Central were interested,
but I'm, you know, I have to really think about the ordinance and think about it to see what I'm willing to have it move forward to give an opportunity if the property is right, because I think there's potentials that there's some properties that could be right. What I don't want to get into though too is giving away properties ahead of ourselves when we don't know what our future use is going to be. So that's one of my concerns, is that just because we have surplus property out there, I mean, as we know across the county, there may be future uses for that we aren't anticipating today. Go to the road right ways that we have lots of property up. You know, which now, like, so some of those in the valley were doing agreements that they can use it for, you know, their trail, but knowing that it may need to be torn up at any time for our sewer and all of that. So, so I'm happy to take a look at it. I'm not ready to make a decision today. I'm just gonna say, I will be willing to make the decision to move forward with the university property. Just because I do think, we've talked about the timing of it. We don't want to have it through the winter. We need to get it sold, so we're not incurring more costs to the taxpayers when it's truly surplus money. And as we have our budget talks and know that we're $11 million under at this point in time. I will be moving forward with that. But I think I want to take a look at this to see if this does provide us some tools in our toolbox when opportunities present themselves.
Very good. Just wanted to note that I learned from talking with Deb that when a property gets identified as potentially surplus, she talks with various departments and I think tries to determine whether there's any potential future uses for the county. So I think that's part of the process. This would just be adding one more layer of thought to what potential uses could be. So I appreciate your willingness to think about it. And if you have any questions that we can work on amending or addressing any concerns, I'd be happy to work with you on that.
Thank you. And thank you for coming in and talking. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you. And that takes us to miscellaneous, and do we have a executive session?
Okay. I'm aware of.
Any other miscellaneous items other than getting data clock tonight? I don't either. Okay. So then we will.
Madam Chair, I think Mr. Maceo has.
Chris down, so.
Gotta speak up, Jim. Gotta shout it out. Mary, I've got
I was
something.
thinking we were gonna get out of here and there we go.
I learned the last
2
time.
minutes.
2 minutes,
Jim.
thank you. Yesterday, Mr. Bischoff indicated that he wanted to modify the notice of public hearing that we're having for a hearing on November 18th at 9 o'clock. The purpose of that hearing is for the board to determine if they want to increase by 1%, if you will, the money in the general fund, the road fund, and the conservation futures above that from which we collected in 2024. Mr. Bischoff had another option under the general fund of using bank capacity and another option under the conservation futures of using bank capacity. So Mr. Bischoff asked me to modify our prior notice to add those two options. By adding the options, we're not taking any action on them at this point in time. This afternoon on your consent agenda, you have a resolution which add those two additional options that I just mentioned. In 2022, the legislature amended the OPMA and they basically said, before the board takes final action on a regular agenda, they have to allow for oral or written testimony. The timeframe to submit written testimony on the consent agenda that we're going to have this afternoon was yesterday at 12. We published the agenda after 12 o'clock. And so by law, we have to take that particular item separately this afternoon because we haven't had any written comment on it. So the reason I'm here is to make it very clear that that item we'll take separately, and then we'll have to see if there's any oral testimony with regard to it.
Do we know which item it is?
Madam Chair, the clerk is listening. I think it's.
Add to it. Be an add to it.
Because I don't think it's on here.
She actually did put out a new agenda to add that on.
I bet it was on the old one.
Gina just handed a new one out, I think.
I don't know.
I'm sorry, Gina
Oh,
just
yes.
indicated it's
Okay.
item number 4A, Madam Chair. And so we don't have to take that one separately. We'll make a motion and then second it and see if anyone wants to comment and then vote on it.
Well, and then I have to open up.
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for allowing me to make that clear.
Thank you, Jim. And when we get to that point, I'll have you come up and speak to it.
That'd be fine. I mean, more than happy, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. Any other? Okay, we will see everybody back for the 2 o'clock and we will adjourn for the morning.